to everyone to move forward, or whether or not people are okay moving forward if the whole board complement is not there. But just wanting to have some dialogue and consensus on that.
So the only thing I would say about September 10th is that's Rosh Hashanah. And I'm not deeply religious, but probably would be doing dinner with family that night. I don't know about Trustee Menta, but, and I will be out of town for one of the other dates, the 20th. I mean, everything else sounds good to me.
May I ask a general question?
Sorry.
Trustee Carpenter was just explaining that she'll be out of town on the 20th and
Rosh Hashanah
Sorry,
is Monday, September 10th, which is one of the other dates for the hearing and discussion of the round use suit.
I have a general question about the budget timeline. So I looked over the long-range plan and I have a lot of questions, and I'm just wondering if we've always had 2 sessions. What is there, like, are we up against the timeline for budget adoption? When's the last day of budget adoption? Like what?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll respond to
Sure,
that.
yes.
Can you speak loudly, please?
I think my voice is carrying into the mic pretty good. So,
Okay.
actually, historically, we have never had 2 sessions on a long-range plan. Last year, staff attempted to have a preliminary session to set priorities on the project schedule without that coming to a successful conclusion. And then we followed up with our normal presentation. I'm also not sure, as we just concluded bonding and had previously approved all debt financed capital projects for 2019, how tight the correlation is in this year for the long-range plan in consideration of the budget itself, as it's really more of a forecasting tool, not, in my mind, directly tying to the budget, because the board has already approved those projects when they approved them and we're bonding for them earlier tonight. So I'm
when
just
I
not
say
sure what you need for that, so that I can then respond to the budgeting deadlines.
So the long-range plan sets out 10 years. It's a planning document, it's a planning exercise, and as such, it doesn't necessarily have to directly correlate with this year's budget. That's why it's a long-range plan. This year, there's no, the debt calculations, the debt capacity, there's no DPW facility got stripped, there's no police garage, there's no Hubbard Park parking lot redo. I'm sure you have great answers for it, but if they're just disappeared and we're looking at numbers that don't include having to do something there, then it's like misinformation in my eyes. So I just want to make sure to give you the heads up that that I think there's stuff that there's questions of, that there's a lot of changes that have been made, and it's probably perfectly easy to explain in 10 minutes. And I'm confident that you think that's possible. So without knowing, the earlier discussions, the pre-discussions that go on without the board, then you would know better. But if there is the potential that board members might have questions about that, I can't work on a planning document, a long-range planning document that doesn't include factors that we know about. So as long as
I could just briefly respond to that. The narratives for all those projects are still in the plan. We have discussed in our prioritization that we are not ready to propose any forward movement on DPW facilities until we get some additional studies on implementation. We discussed with the completion of the police facility that the board would like additional engineering alternatives presented to them before they considered any implementation of the completion of that project. And then the Hubbard Park is the oddball out, and that is just hanging there waiting for and LED lighting, waiting for the board to determine when that fits in with their,
So when we're done with the
Implementation
long
plan.
range, I don't want to get into details, but when we're done with that meeting, we'll have all of those projects in there somewhere as placeholders, knowing they have to occur. And you'll rerun the numbers for us
yes,
and present them back when?
when I'm in a number of weeks, when I can finish rerunning all the numbers. So at that point in time, we have Ellers run the final bond numbers. The draft is just my schedules. Ellers has a little more.
This isn't for bonding though, this is in the out years.
The board has traditionally required Ellers to run the final numbers so that they're independently verified from staff estimates.
Well, I think we're gonna need more time. So that's my personal opinion.
You think, I'm sorry, can you?
Yeah, I think we're gonna need more time. Now, Rebecca has, mentioned that it is a special meeting, so we could just spend as much time as needed. There's nothing that comes after it.
On August 29th, it's set aside specifically for the long-range plan. And I would offer that, this year, it's such a big transition year. This is some of the dialogue that I was having with the finance director today. So I can certainly appreciate where, especially coming in as new board members, the first time you're kind of hearing the information, digesting the information, and that, if you as a group want to get together and have another meeting, we'd welcome an opportunity to do that. I believe that the finance director would like to go through his first presentation with all of you to kind of get things acclimated and perhaps address some of the questions that you have out there. And so we're happy to have that discussion with the board. We just want to have that with you as a whole.
Well, and then the other question, I've seen now my own request and then another trustee's request, which is the numbers are run based on a 2% tax growth. So all the debt calculations and the ability to going into budget are based on 2%. Are we going to have some choices in that discussion?
So I'm happy that you brought that up, because when we were in the prioritization discussion, Trustee Amenta had submitted an initiative with regards to that. And if you'll recall at the last meeting, on the 2nd or the 16th, they're all blending together, I apologize. When we had left off the discussion, there was not conclusion from this group in terms of how to proceed with that initiative. So that would be very helpful to hear from the board how they would desire. In lieu of the fact that there was not prioritized direction with regards to a number of those initiatives, staff was planning on providing options to the board in terms of here's some things that you can evaluate in terms of cutting. We can have the same discussion relative to the long-range plan, but ultimately, and this is, they are service level decisions.
But to run the number, you picked 2% tax levy increase. So that's a good discussion. I don't know if it's agendized, which it's not, but at some point we need, if you want full board to make a vote, agendize it. Because I clearly heard that there are trustees on the board that would like to be able to evaluate numbers based on a 0% tax increase. Doesn't mean that's what we're gonna come up with or decide upon, but we don't have the spreadsheets. Only Mark has the spreadsheets. Yes, Mark.
Yeah.
Can I just point out that the agenda item is really one on scheduling,
Right.
and these discussions about
I agree.
the 0% initiative and the details of the long-range financial plan are not the subject of the agenda item, and I'd like to just stay to the scheduling.
Okay, thank you, I agree with you. So, saying that, as long as, we'll just talk about that in long-range planning. What do you need from us?
To talk about if you would like to meet on additional dates, and if so, how we can best accommodate that. As a summary of that discussion, what I'm hearing from the group is that before there's evaluation of additional consideration, and correct me if I'm wrong in here, but that we should list that discussion of how presentation of the budget should go for the meeting on August 29th, because it's not specifically agendized.
August 29th is not the budget.
Could you
It's a
move the
long-range plan.
phone closer to the, like, so hard to hear?
So, Rebecca was just saying on August 29th, which is the long-range financial plan meeting, we do not have on the agenda right now, but there has been expressed need for a discussion, further discussion on running numbers at 0% budget. Not budget, but projection, so that input tax levy, 0% tax levy growth rather than 2%. So because we don't have it on our agenda, we could do it during our long-range financial planning meeting, which is August 29th. However, the long-range financial plan will be run with an assumption of a 2% tax levy increase.
So it's all done.
I
How are
on
advised?
On August 29th, if we have a meeting on August 20th, okay, then you're suggesting from the memo that the only thing we discussed is the fee schedule. So we're still talking a single meeting for long-range plan, and I'm assuming there are many other things on that agenda. So I guess my concern is, if we have 90 minutes or an hour to talk about the long-range plan, that I would not like a half hour of that to be taken up with a presentation. If we as a group have only 60 minutes to discuss this very important document, my feeling is that we should have read it and understood it on our own, and that the most efficient use of our time, given that we may only have 60 or 90 minutes, would be to have time to answer our questions. And further than that, to actually deliberate a little bit between ourselves about what we see as important capital projects and infrastructure planning over the next 10 years. I mean, that's a big question. Number one, I feel 90 minutes is, I would like to have, I agree with the President Rozak that I would like to have more than one meeting on the long-range financial plan. And number two, if you're going to say we absolutely can't do it and we have these 90 minutes, then we cannot have, a significant portion of that time taken up with a review of a document that we've been provided ahead of time to read. But
Why are we limited to 90 minutes, and can't we just call a special board meeting instead of a committee of the whole?
The meeting on Wednesday, August 29th is a special board meeting just for the long-range plans. So there's been no discussion of limiting time to 90 minutes.
Okay, on the schedule we were given, it just says cow on there, the board says.
Well, correct. We could, given that there is now action that's required from listing further discussion on how things are presented, we would request that it be changed to a special board meeting. But we have no other meeting that night, it's a Wednesday, so the only topic that was going to be listed on the agenda was the long-range plan.
Why would we meet August 20th just on fee review instead of if we were having a special meeting, fee/long-range planning, to get those basics out of the way so that we can come back? You'd have from the 20th to the 29th at least to make any modifications in running numbers that you might need to do. I just fear that you get into a meeting and a trustee wants to see something different, and we're right back to where we've always been in our planning, in our budgeting sessions, which is too bad. We have this one session and I don't have the information nor the ability to run those numbers. I can't go through another year like that. So when I say I mean the residents expect us to work on our long-range financial plan and our budget, and to limit it to one day is not acceptable, and I've never said it was acceptable. Every year I ask for that long-range financial plan to be run at 0%. And so if it's not, which it's not, it's run at a 2% tax levy, then I'd like to be able to discuss, see if we can have some time to run a spreadsheet and bring back so we can actually make decisions. Otherwise, what are we really here for? Just to take what the administration gives us and adopt it? I mean, there is a purpose of having the board be able to deliberate. And it certainly isn't to shove it down our throats and not have the ability to, as a group, rather than individually come in and ask questions, because that's not going to help, because every time we do that, Rebecca, you said I want the board to make a decision, which I agree with you. But we can't make decisions or changes if we can't meet significantly, in enough time to ask questions, talk about different scenarios, and run some numbers.
I hear you. So I wanna comment on two parts. Number one, the only reason why a fee schedule was proposed for August 20th is because if you'll recall, the board had agreed that they were not going to meet for this portion of August. And we had people, and I'll reference Trustee Mocker as being one of those people who had said, I cannot meet, I want to be here for the long range plan, right? Verbally in the meeting, I want to be here for the long range plan, I want to be here for those discussions. And so the meeting was set on the 29th based around schedules and cancellations of meetings. So,